The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. There's more to you than you can see, said Gus, the man who started to turn around Joe Roberts' life. At the time, Joe was living on the streets of Vancouver. He was a drug user, he was struggling with mental health, and he was in and out of the criminal justice system. I had lost the belief in possibility. I only saw failure ahead of me until Gus, says Joe. From there, the journey to recovery began. Over the course of the next 5 years, Joe entered rehab. He returned to school and studied business and marketing, where he graduated on the Dean's List and won the Laurie H. Cameron Memorial Award for academic excellence with a combined GPA of 3.94. It seems improbable, but it wasn't. And it's in large part because of his faith in God and his renewed belief in a better future. Joe Roberts entered the business world and co-founded Mindware Design Communications in 1997. Then, in 2016, Joe walked across Canada pushing a modified shopping cart, a symbol of homelessness for the Push for Change campaign. His goal, to raise money and awareness about youth homelessness. He walked 24 kilometers a day through all 4 seasons and more. I invited Joe Roberts to join me for a conversation that matters about belief in the possible and the power it has to change your life. Joe, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm grateful to be here.
You know, this sense of believing in the possible or having hope, it is so vitally important in all of our lives, but especially for somebody who's struggling to find their way.
I think it's really relevant today more than anything. I've been sharing my story for over 25 years. And it used to be a time pre-COVID when my message resonated with 30-40% of the audience, people who have been lifed by life. Now, with so much change and challenge, I think that idea of looking beyond the challenges, both internal and external, how do we navigate this world that we live in today? So, yeah, it definitely was a challenge considering where I started. You know, it's interesting to be where we are. For viewers, they may not know this, but this studio is a block away from the viaduct I used to sleep under. So coming here today was kind of like, yeah, it was interesting rolling back through a lot of those memories.
Well, you've written this book, The Push for Change, and in it, right away, you start talking about finding purpose and how important that is. How, when you are at that place that you were at as a very young man or an elderly teen, how do you start to go about trying to find purpose? Is it something that you can do on your own, or does it take the encouragement of others?
I think for me, it was definitely others. I was lost. The light was out, and I was just bumping around in the dark. But I had really good people in my life, and I think that the timing for me was ready. But I'd have to sort of describe it like in the beginning, it was about self-preservation. And I was 22 years old. I had spent 3 or 4 years in Vancouver's downtown east side, Granville Street. And my life was starting to have some pretty serious consequences, and I knew if I continued. So the timing was good, but then it was the chance encounter with a guy named Gus on a park bench in the number 10 Fraser bus stop right in front of Army and Navy. And I remember,
just over there.
Yeah, exactly, just down around the corner. And he looked at me, and he had a 10-minute conversation, and he said, "Joe, there's more to you than you can see." And at the time, I was dirty, disheveled, scruffy beard, broken teeth, matted hair, clothes I'd been wearing for over a year. But for the first time in my life, someone other than my mom or my daddy spoke to my possibility, which I believe is the cornerstone to all great leadership. That 10-minute conversation planted a seed. He looked past how I was showing up, and he spoke to my potential. Every single one of us navigates challenges in our life. You may never, be homeless in the streets of downtown Vancouver, but people listening to this today are going through their own challenges, their own struggles. And knowing that we are so much more than our circumstances, so much more than our past, so much more than our than our history. He spoke to that, and within a short period of time, the things began to line up. I had a mom that wouldn't quit on me. She brought me back to Ontario, entered into detox, full recovery program, and then off to college. I graduated with honors, and then actually moved back here after 5 years sober, and did extremely well in business.
You know, somebody might be saying, okay, well, hang on a second. What put you on the street in the first place? Because your early life sounded idyllic, but then it turned into a nightmare.
Yeah, life lifed me. You know, I was wandering down the road of life, and we turned a corner, and you know, for the first 8 years of my life, things were perfect. Dad worked at a seatbelt factory in Midland, Ontario. Mom was a stay-at-home mom. She had a part-time job at a dress shop, and one late night in August 1975, my father, at 35 years old, dropped dead from a heart attack. And so, just like that, the trajectory of our life changed. We didn't have a plan B. We didn't have really good life insurance. And so now, you know, our family, three things happened in that moment. I lost my dad, a guy who used to say to me, I love you, I believe in you, you can be anything. Our family lost, my mom lost her husband, and our family lost our economic stability. And within a very short period of time, remember, this is the early 1970s, my mom remarried. And I don't fault her for that. She had a mortgage and 3 small children to raise, but the man who came in next wasn't anything like my dad. He was a violent, abusive alcoholic. So I went from a father figure who would say, I love you, you can be anything, to a man who would say things like, you're stupid, you're dumb, and you'll never amount to anything. And so I think the combination of losing my dad and the ongoing verbal, mental, and physical abuse, those traumas led to this fracture in self-worth. And at 9 years old, when the opportunity presented itself to experiment with drugs, I joined. And I didn't do it because I was curious about drug consumption. I did it because I wanted to belong. I wanted to fit.
Somewhere.
Yeah. But something happened in that moment, is that under the influence, all of a sudden, everything, I wasn't afraid anymore. I felt safe in an emotionally uncertain world. You know, we think about the last 5 years that we've had to navigate, right? From COVID to where we are now with, you know, uncertainty and weather, economy, tariffs, all of the things that are going on. We feel unsafe. And so what's our go-to? What's your go-to? Some people meditate, they jog, they go to meetings, they commiserate, they've got a therapist. Other people eat. They death scroll social media, they worry, they get anxiety, they get depression, and they get deeper. And so it's only normal for human beings to find ways to alter our emotional state when we feel afraid. The problem is that in the beginning there weren't consequences, but those consequences became huge. And by the time I was 15, kicked out of the house, I jumped on a bus, I came out to Vancouver, and by the time I was 17, 18, I was a street kid.
Living on the street at that age.
Yeah. And it happened so fast. Like, the thing is that my story is painfully common. I'm not, you know, this thing happens all the time. It's one of the reasons why I do the advocacy work that I do, is that, you know, not every childhood is created equal. And for some of us, we might have troubles when we're 14, 15, 16, and we hit gravel, but we've got good parents, maybe we're involved in sports. Maybe there's something that tethers us or allows us to make a mistake or two. What about that kid who doesn't have the ability to make a mistake or two? 1 or 2 mistakes, and all of a sudden they're facing some really serious consequences.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. So you're on the street for about 5 years before you meet Gus.
Yeah.
And as you tell that story about Gus, it makes me realize that Gus had no awareness of what the lifelong impact would be on you from him telling you that. But it goes to show that what he said matters in so many ways and has affected so many other people. It drives home the value of, one, appreciating other people, recognizing their positive attributes, and celebrating that with them, because it changes lives.
There's 3 things that happen in that 10-minute conversation. 1, Gus encouraged me. He spoke to my possibility. We all have that friend or someone in our life that has absolute potential and brilliance, but they can't see it. So he pointed to that. The second thing he did is he challenged me. Not everything he said was warm and fuzzy. He had some hard words for me, but he did it with love and empathy and compassion, and I was able to hear it. And the third thing is he acknowledged me. He created space. You know, that 10-minute conversation changed the trajectory of my life. I never got to go back and thank him. And when you think about your life, how many 10-minute interactions do we have as parents at Starbucks? If we're leading people, if we're a teacher, you know, those moments matter. He spent 10 minutes with me, and I've shared that story in his honor with over 1 million people around the planet. Because I believe that we all have that right and maybe even that responsibility every single day to look for those opportunities where we can plant that seed of possibility in the hearts and minds of others.
Well, thank you, Gus.
Yeah.
Look at the difference that he's made.
Yeah.
And probably unaware of it. And I think that is, in some ways, something that we can all benefit from in recognizing that we do influence other people's lives, and we may never actually know what that influence is. But what we do and say matters.
Well, and it's been in the last 5 years that we're talking about empathic leadership, where it's become profitable for leaders in all walks of life to be understand what is a mile in that person's shoes, what's going on, and it's really the smart way to move through life. And you made a really great point. It's that we may not understand the impact. I do a thing in a workshop where I ask people to list the 5 people that had the biggest impact on their life. Sometimes it's mom and dad. Sometimes it isn't. A hockey coach. It could be a music teacher. It could have been their first boss. It could have been a pastor, member of their faith community. A friend. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's easy for us to identify those people in our life that help shape our character and help us get to where we are today. It's a little bit more opaque if I was to say, how many people do you think you're on their list? So we don't know that.
Right.
But it doesn't stop me every single day from going out and modeling that work that Gus introduced me to. And it's kind of become a life mantra, is that idea that inside each and every person there's more than we see.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. So what's your message to others who may have people in their lives that are struggling? How do they help them? Because we've got a serious problem right now. Out the back door of this studio, I see people who are hunched over, suffering the devastating impacts of fentanyl consumption. And you go, how do I reach out to that person? What can I do that actually will have some benefit? Not beyond saying, okay, here's a couple of bucks, go buy yourself a burger or whatnot. Like, that's not helpful. But what do you do?
I think there's 3 things. The first thing is to hold the possibility that individual, our city, our country can shift and change. You know, there was a time in the late 1800s when gin in the city of London was being consumed by 5 and 6 and 7-year-old kids. So that we can turn the corner on these really, really big social, and I don't want to be trite and bumper stickery on that. There's really good research and there's really good people who are doing work in that space. But to hold the possibility that we can, if we don't ever get to that place where we can hold a possibility and for individuals and for our city and our country, we're not going to be able to get into that place, that part of our brain where we can solve these problems. Now, for the individual, I like to look at it and say, okay, there's two things here. We need to support people, but also challenge behavior, and it's that mix. I don't know if I'm going to have that much impact on that guy or gal in the alleyway, but what I can do is I can see their possibility like Gus saw me. Okay, number one, because if I'm not holding that space for them, I can almost guarantee they're not holding that space. Right. Number 2 is to have that encouraging conversation where you support them, but you challenge their behavior and ask them if they would like to sort of walk alongside with you. When you get into sort of the bigger issues, it's very easy for an individual to become overwhelmed, because what has to happen is about 10 million things over a decade. So what do? I can hold possibility, support the person, and challenge the behavior, but also recognize that it's not my job to save the world. It's my job to show up in that moment.
Like Gus.
Yeah.
Gus had no idea what he was unleashing.
Yeah. And it's oftentimes when I'm engaged in that kind of work, is I take the attitude that it's not my responsibility what happens. I'm just going to do my best and show up, and let serendipity, let God, let whatever sort of prevail. But the best thing that I can do is show up in kindness.
And so by then helping somebody recognize that there is a possible better future, they still need to find that purpose for themselves in life. I think of Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, and he talks about the role that purpose plays in his ability to endure horrific circumstances. And that purpose becomes such a burning, fuel or energy that can move you forward.
It can, but the one thing that I acknowledge when I look through that lens is that bouncing from the person in the alleyway to purpose is a bit like getting a haircut and getting the job.
It's not a straight line.
No, it's not. And we need to take a look at Maslow's theory of hierarchy and say, okay, we need to do a couple of things first before we can get them to the foundation. My transition and transition to many people who find recovery is you got to deal with those basic needs first, and then we can move to the place where it's beyond survival, because that's where purpose is. In the beginning, it was, I have to do this or I'm going to perish. And then once life stabilized a little bit, then it was like, hey, wait a minute, maybe there's more, and let's sort of explore that. But those first steps of getting me safe, getting me housed, getting me sober, that needed to happen.
Well, it's like children in a war. They learn how to survive the next 5 minutes. And when you're on the street, that's what you're endeavoring to do. So then if you're constantly worried about how am I going to get through this morning, how do you then start to, and this comes into line with, well, what have our policies been here? Are we giving people those kinds of resources that help them stabilize? Do they have a place that they can live in, that they can be supported, that they've got clothing and food? At least that foundation is addressed.
Over 30 years ago, I walked the streets with then Mayor Philip Owen.
I remember him.
Great man.
Yeah.
And, he was talking about reform. He was talking about 4 pillars. And, I was excited because I hadn't heard this from municipal leadership. And having my lived experience, I leaned heavy. 30 years later, we've built parts of each of those pillars, but it's like we have a table with uneven legs.
Yeah.
And so there is systems and models, and there's really great people working on those ideas. But until there's a political will to make sure that all of those sort of meet, then it's going to be a fragmented approach. So, and some of the things that we thought would work 10 years ago miserably failed. And so, and it's really interesting with my story and background. You would think that I really sort of lean left on this, but I'm more of a centrist because I'm a business person, and I've been doing recovery for over 30 years. But there are some things that have happened where I would say, well, I don't know if that's the approach I would want taken if it was my daughter. And again, that's just sort of my lens. And so I try to set that aside and be very pragmatic in my approach and say, well, wait a minute, what is the research telling us? What are some of those smart people at UBC and SFU and folks at Homeless Hub and the Alliance to End Homelessness and some of these really, really smart people? What are they saying? What are they, where are they leading us?
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. So, you managed to put the life into your past and went on to have a successful business career, but you never gave up on other people who might be struggling along that journey. Why was it so important for you to pay it forward?
I think it's just the community, and it's sort of one of those values that we hold dear. You know, there's a phrase, we only keep what we have by giving it away. And so once I became successful, I started to think, okay, what if I could have an impact on kids? And just by sharing my story in an honest way, prevent them. And so I started to speak anonymously into the school systems, but Maclean's magazine found out about it and did an article on it. And they put me on the cover of Maclean's in the 2003 honor roll. And that sort of led me to do more schools, and we built a foundation. And then I wrote my first book, and I started to find myself in the speaking circuit, doing Chamber of Commerce, working for associations, working for government, working for private corporations, and just sharing various different perspectives on leadership and that experience. But in 2003, I sold the company. I moved away from that. My daughter was born, and I just started doing advocacy full time. And then in 2012, I was on an airplane with my then partner, Dr. Sean Richardson, and a former Olympic athlete, real smart guy, real high performance. And I said, I want to do something nationally to raise the volume on what we could do to protect kids so they don't fall through the cracks like I did. And he says, when Canadians want to do things and inspire the country, they run across the country. He says, Joe, why don't you run? We were inspired by obviously Terry Fox and of course Rick Hansen. And he said, why don't you run across Canada? And I remember looking at him. We were on a WestJet flight going into Calgary, and I said, why don't you run across Canada? I'm happy just doing these school presentations. But there was something about it that clicked for me. Now, I was a non-athlete, so the physical part of it didn't appeal. But then he said something. He said, Joe, if you were able to have a conversation across this nation with law enforcement, with government, with students, with frontline folks who are in the battle every single day, he says, I really think your message could make a difference, and we could talk about the change that we're trying to push for. Yeah.
Did you have the impact that you had hoped for?
There was some things that I'd like to do over, but as far as it wasn't so much ever about raising money for us, although we raised about $700,000. Fundraising wasn't the core issue. Awareness was. And there are some pockets and some things that we're really, really proud of. We had a tremendous impact with law enforcement partners like the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Ontario Provincial Police. We had an impact and got to engage with over 100,000 kids and implement school programs in pockets. And I could tell you stories about, we were in this community, and when we left, things have never sort of gone back. Did we solve the problem? No, the problem's twice as bad as it was back then. But there were things that we did, that we achieved, that we didn't think were possible.
So somebody's watching this interview right now and they go, okay, I'm inspired. How can I help? Where do they go? Well,
I think it's looking at what do you have to offer. Maybe you're, someone who has time, join a board, get involved in your local community. What floats your boat? What blows your hair back? Do you like mentoring? Do you want to work with kids? Maybe get involved in a boys and clubs or a YMCA if you want to do more frontline stuff. Does your church group do ministry in the downtown east side? Maybe you volunteer and do some work with Union Gospel Mission or Salvation Army Harbor Light. If you've got means or you got a family foundation, you can write checks. So it's time, treasure, and talent. Yeah. But the first and foremost thing that I would say to anybody is before you even do something, hold the possibility that whatever it is that you do could have an impact on someone's life. Because if you do that, you will.
Fabulous point to wrap up on. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.